This video is not about balance. It's not about game design, really, in the truest sense. It's not about if something is better or worse. This video is, kind of really, it is an opinion, so it belongs here, but really it's kind of more advice. It's an opinion with advice tacked on. So, when in a D&D type of game, and this actually applies to a much broader range of RPGs than a lot of the D&D specific things that I talk about. Players are going to be rolling dice to see if they succeed at various tasks, or to see, to check the outcome of the tasks. Sometimes success is not actually at stake. So you're going to be rolling dice, and sometimes you're going to fail. Tough luck. There is this sort of prevalent idea, and I think this is definitely the more common way to do it, where when a player fails at a roll, the narrative goes that the character failed to do the thing that they were trying to do. You're trying to climb over a wall, you roll a 1, sorry, you climb up a bit and then you fall. You can't do it. And this has a couple of issues. Narratively, there is no reason you could not try again. And you keep, unless someone is chasing you, unless there's a time constraint, if you are just exploring and you're like, oh, can I climb up to that ledge? Well, make a roll. Fail. Oh, can I try again? Why not? Which is kind of bad. I don't know, is design the right word? It's kind of a bad situation where the game mechanics are not really serving to improve the gameplay experience, because you just roll until you get the result you want, and then the story moves on. That's not great. Rolling more than once for the same thing, in my mind, it means that you need to have a better system. Either don't roll at all because you can guarantee success, or have a better system where a failed roll precludes trying again. At least trying again in the exact same way. Maybe you try a different approach. And you can write that in as an explicit thing. If you fail a roll, you cannot try with the same type of roll to do the same thing. But there is that sort of narrative dissonance there, where it doesn't make any sense that you couldn't try again. So what I usually advocate for in situations like this is that not all failures are actually the character failing to do something. If you are sneaking through an area and you fail the sneak roll, it doesn't mean that suddenly you fell on your face, made a big noise. It's not you failing. Sometimes the enemy or the environment just isn't not amicable, but isn't compatible with the approach that you're trying to take. Can I climb up to that ledge? I don't know, make a roll. Fail. Actually, no, the cliff is too sheer. So you don't even try. You can see from where you're at, I'm not going to make it up there. So, that kind of thing, where if the roll goes badly, it doesn't mean that the character failed. It means that the task is impossible currently. And that tells the player, I can try a different approach, but I cannot try this approach again, which I think is much better. It also has the side effect of not making the player feel like such a doofus. Oftentimes, especially when I'm running the game, I try to make the player characters feel as cool and as powerful and as competent as possible. And this is not just for D&D stuff. This is for basically any RPG I run. I'm going to assume competence on the part of the player characters. Unless there's a specific theme in the game that I am running where the player characters are not supposed to be competent and cool and powerful. That does happen occasionally. I tend not to gravitate towards those games though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find a way where a failure, because failure needs to be a possibility. You can't succeed at everything. But I'm going to find a way to make the failure not their fault. narratively speaking. I mean, like, sometimes it's their fault. Sometimes you will mess up, especially at lower levels, because then as I phase that out over the course of play, as the character advances, it's going to be less and less their failure and more success of the opposition, or the role determines that the task is impossible. Upon closer inspection, no, you can't do the thing that you were trying to do. You can't even attempt it. And I think implementing this idea not only is going to make the players feel cooler, it's going to keep gameplay moving and actually keep them on their toes a bit more, particularly if your game has a lot of skill check or action roll based mechanics, as certain tables of D&D have, but also a lot of other RPGs lean quite heavily on. You're going to be making a lot of rolls to try to accomplish your task. The more of that there is, the more you want to be aware that roles do not only correspond to the performance of the player character. Especially when you consider that attacks in D&D, this is more specifically for D&D, attacks against inanimate objects tends to be against an AC, an AC 10 or so. If you're hit, it's a low AC because objects are easy to hit, but you can miss, especially at lower levels where you might miss on more than just a nat 1. But if you roll that nat 1, you are going to not do any damage. And yes, we all know that AC is not just strictly hit and miss. It's hit in a place that does damage. But think about the really competent martial characters that you might be able to conjure up. How often should they miss? How often should they fail to perform the attack that they want against an inanimate object? It should be never. Never should be your answer. They are powerful, competent. I am an amateur sword fighter. I can hit my target most of the time if it's not moving. You know what I mean? If it is something that you are quite skilled in, there shouldn't even be a roll. You can't fail. But in some cases, particularly when there's a time constraint, enemies are bearing down, you have to break through this gate to get out, make your attack roll, smash. But if you hit it and it doesn't take damage, does that mean that it's immune to damage? Or does it mean that you are just you're just having an off day, man? You're super skilled with a sword, but I guess 1 out of every 20 attacks is going to be a flop. Or are there other circumstances that interfere with that? Maybe as you go in, one of the attackers that are coming after you throws a rope or throws a rock and throws off your attack, and you're not able to get the attack that you wanted that time. So this isn't even just a mechanic for saying you can't try again, because in that case you could try again, because the circumstance, the thing that made you fail is very temporary. It's a instantaneous thing. The point is that you should try not to have every failure just be the player characters being bad at their job. And in fact, that should be a minority of cases, even as entry-level characters. And it should get even more rare as time goes on. And I think using this technique is going to improve your play experience. Yeah, it is going to improve your play experience. It is going to improve your players' play experience. It is going to make you a more proficient DM as you engage with more aspects of the story than just, did you succeed? Did you fail? Because that's often how we describe the result of the roll. If you roll well, you succeed. If you roll poorly, you fail. But just like with AC and hit and miss as the terminology that we use to interact with the game, those are insufficient descriptors for what can actually be happening in the narrative, because there is a difference between I failed and you beat me. If you've played games of high skill, you know what that is that sometimes you just don't do well, and sometimes you do as well as you can, but you still lose. That happens sometimes, that's a real life thing, and that can happen in the game too. So I would encourage you to sort of incorporate that a bit more. Circumstances can conspire to make you fail at something or be unable to attempt it. And that's kind of, I want to weave this in as part of the same topic. Sometimes failing a roll is not you attempted and were unable to do it, even environmentally. Sometimes it is you assess the situation and you realize you can't succeed. And that, man, I want to say it's in one of the Dungeon Master's guides, and I can't remember which one. I'm almost positive it is. Or maybe I read it on some blog or something. This was advice that I read a long time ago and took to heart, where not every failed roll needs to be a failed attempt. Sometimes you can say you want to climb up, make a roll. Actually, your roll is not high enough. You know you can't climb this wall. And that is, and it is just like assessing the situation and realizing that you can't succeed right now. Maybe in a few levels when your bonus is higher. And that's the thing that you can do. Obviously you wouldn't want to do that with attacks. That would be a skill check exploration thing. Can I sense magic? No, you fail. Well, I should specify in the context of like a 4th edition game where sensing magic is a skill check and it is not a spell that automatically works. So, I walk into a room, sense magic. Well, you can't sense any magic and you can't try because, I obviously assuming you failed the roll, you can't get any magic. You feel like there's a dampening field in this room, so you can't even try to sort of open up your mind. You can't get any senses of the arcane flow in this area. That kind of stuff. That was actually a really, really poor example. That was maybe the worst example I could have come up with. Can I squeeze through this small crevice opening in the cave to try to get to the next chamber? Well, you fail your acrobatics roll. You look in. No, doesn't look like you can. It's too small. And that doesn't leave you like just stuck in the middle. And it doesn't mean that you like try and then have to back out like a dope. And these are all steps to make the player characters feel cooler. And it's a small thing because most of the time it's not going to make much of a difference. But it does it sets the tone. And that's an important thing too. Setting the tone to establish that these player characters are cool. They are powerful. They are competent. They know what they're doing. They've done this stuff before. And they're not going to just randomly fail at least 1 out of every 20 attempts at the thing that they're good at. So, what would I call that? Failed checks as poor luck, I guess? I don't know what I would call this. I'm going to be naming this in a minute. But yeah, it's just an alternate way to run skill checks, ability checks. Failure doesn't have to be the player's fault.